Welcome to the fall of Themistocles. Athens had been destroyed twice in the Great War with the Persians. However, in returning to their city, Athens, and the Acropolis, they were delighted to find, cut to Acropolis, that the sacred tree of Athena had started to produce new, fresh buds, which was a sign of hope. Cut back to Athens. Immediately they set to work rebuilding the city. Themistocles was the hero of all of Greece. He it was who had saved them from the Persians at Salamis and who had rescued the Athenians from certain destruction. He began a great project in Athens of building walls all around the city. Great walls that would protect them from future invasions. And the biggest thing that they did was to actually start building walls down to their harbor at the sea. Because you see, Athens was quite a distance from the water. It was a fair distance inland. And in order to be able to withstand a prolonged siege, they needed to have access to their port, their harbor, because that was where any supplies would be coming from. Now, over in Sparta, way in the distance, the Spartans were quite upset that this was the case. They were hoping that Athens would build no walls and be wall-less as they themselves were. This would prevent an accumulation of power in their neighboring city-state of Athens. Well, Themistocles played a little trick. He told all of the Athenians to keep building the walls while he was gone, and he would go and stall the Spartans. So Themistocles traveled to the Spartans, met with them, and dialogued with them for a long time about the issue. Meanwhile, Athens continued to build walls back in Athens. He even had them send one of their messengers to start going to Athens in order to discuss further with them and see the progress on the walls. And by the time that guy got back, the walls were basically finished. And Themistocles returned to the city, the Spartans quite angry with him for having fooled them and tricked them in this way, came back to the city, and by that time, the Athenians had been able to build walls that reached all the way down to the sea. Now, my walls are not going to do that quite as well, but you get the idea. So basically, these walls extended all the way to the sea, creating a corridor. This is going to be tricky. Creating a corridor that led all the way from the city down to their harbor. Let's just do it like this. Imagine that is all walls. This was going to prove very effective for Athens in the future and prevent them from being taken over by enemies. At this time, the Ionian city-states were still under the control of Xerxes over in the Persian Empire. Even though the Greeks had driven him out of Greece, he still controlled Ionia. And those Ionians wanted their freedom. So they sent to ask both Sparta and Athens and the Greek city-states in general for help. Now, those Greek city-states on the Peloponnesus down here, including Sparta, their plan was to just resettle all of those colonies to Greece. Rather than have to deal with them being over here, they said, let's just bring them to our side of the world and resettle them, give them cities here, and that will take care of the problem. Now, Athens, who had a pretty vested interest in these Ionian city-states, many of them were her colonies, shut that idea down pretty much right away. And they took a special interest in trying to help out these Ionian city-states. So Athens and Sparta sent a fleet to the Hellespont, taking over some of the city-states here, and particularly taking over the city of Byzantium, which is right about in this vicinity. Now, Byzantium was a key point on the western side, but which was connected to Ionia. And the leader of that particular mission was Pausanias. Now, Pausanias was the military general, a Spartan, who had led at the Battle of Plataea. But as he became the lord of Byzantium, he became proud and overbearing. He started to actually act rather like the Persians, taking on some of their customs, their dress, their way of doing things. And he secretly began communicating with Xerxes about handing the Greeks over to him. And he was sending messengers. He was sending messengers to Xerxes, and secretly, and the way he was doing this was from his control point here. He was sending messengers across to Xerxes, and with a message, and then telling Xerxes that as soon as that person arrived, to kill the slave. So all these slaves were going and were not returning. And the Spartans back at home began to become suspicious, wondering what was going on. So they sent and brought Pausanias back 2 different times, trying to figure out his treachery, and both times they were not able to discover anything. Until one of those servants who he was about to send to Xerxes got smart. This guy realized all the slaves who go to Persia never return. Something's weird. So he went to the leaders of the Spartans, told them this information, handed over his letter, and Pausanias was discovered to be the traitor that he was. Now he fled to a temple in Sparta and clung to the altar, seeking sanctuary. And the very Spartan solution to this problem was just to board up the wall of the entrance of the temple, so that Pausanias gradually starved and met his end. Now, over in Athens, Themistocles was still in charge, but Themistocles had many enemies. Themistocles was accused of many different things by his political enemies. Now, this is pretty normal for famous people in politics to have political enemies. And they leveled a number of attacks at him. First of all, there was the accusation that he was taking bribes. And although there was no proof, it did turn out that when he left Athens, he had quite a large fortune, which no one knew where it had come from. He also tended to boast about his accomplishments whenever anybody attacked him. He would boast about how he had saved Greece during the Greco-Persian War, basically to just shut up whoever was leading an attack against him, and wouldn't really deal with the accusations they were bringing. He was also accused of betraying Athens to the Persians. Now, the real thing that it seems that Themistocles was interested in was not like Pausanias to actually betray the city, but he wanted to have trade. He was looking at the map, realizing the size of the Persian Empire, and realizing that if Greece began to open up trade routes into Persia, a lot of wealth would flow through Greece and would allow them to become more powerful. However, and so he wanted peace with peace treaties with Xerxes so that they could trade. However, this was not looked on favorably. It was looked on as kind of a traitor's perspective, and so he was ostracized, made to leave Athens and travel the wilds by himself. And as he went to different places, he was rejected wherever he came. Nobody wanted him in their city because he had already been rejected by... Oh, where did he go? He had been rejected by the Athenians, and nobody wanted to go against Athens. One time he actually dressed himself up as a lady, went in a litter, which was a carrying device for ladies to escape from a city. Well, finding no friends in Greece, he did the next best thing and went to the enemy. He went to Xerxes and asked Xerxes for sanctuary. And Xerxes was delighted. I mean, this was one of his great enemies, and now that great enemy had been rejected by his own people and was coming to him, and the two became very close very quickly. I'm sorry, this is not Xerxes anymore. This is now Xerxes' son, because Xerxes is dead. This is now Xerxes' son, Artaxerxes. My bad. So Artaxerxes is now ruling in Persia, and he joyfully and eagerly accepts Themistocles into his court. However, according to legend, now we don't know if this is true, but according to legend, he was conferencing with Themistocles and wanted Themistocles to help him plan an invasion of Greece. And Themistocles was not willing to betray his countrymen to that degree, and so drank poison and took his own life. Now, Themistocles is an example of one of the problems with Greece. Now, we've talked a lot about how power corrupts and the dangers of power. And the Athenians, the Greeks in general, and the Athenians particularly, were well aware of how power could corrupt and that it could turn people into tyrants. But because they feared tyranny so much, they often didn't treat their heroes with the proper amount of honor and reward. They, like we've said before, they ostracized those who were growing too powerful. And so a lot of their heroes ended up turning against them, going to the enemy because they were not able to receive the adulation that they deserved from their companions at home. And so we've talked a lot about the danger of power, but we haven't talked a lot about the fact that power is necessary to do good things. Themistocles had to use his power to save Athens at a time where she was in great distress. And while power is dangerous and needs to be treated carefully, it also is a tool that enables us to do great things, to save those who we love. And Themistocles is an example of how power can be used well, but also how when those heroes of a nation are not properly appreciated, how they can turn their backs on their own countrymen. And that's the end of Themistocles.